Let's talk now, though, to Roy Lilley, former NHS Trust Chairman, because the NHS today is in the news. The Labour Party are saying, the government are saying over 2 million extra NHS appointments have been delivered early as trusts have been handed £40 million to go further and faster. It's a slightly tricky one, this, because they have managed to get over 2 million more appointments, but they're comparing it to a period last year when there was a lot of strikes going on. They've admitted that, yes, there were strikes, and yes, by giving 23 billion, the strikes have been ended. They've also got to this figure somehow by working at weekends, which is something I've suggested they do for a long time. Let's see what Roy's got to say. Roy, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Good morning.
So, I mean, you could call it a step in the right direction, but I think they're slightly massaging this one to make it look a little bit better than it is, aren't they?
Yes, you can smell the massage oil as you read this.
Very well put.
Yeah, it's good news. The NHS has been working its socks off, but can Labour take the credit for it? Well, certainly ending the strikes was a really huge, big thing that the NHS would need, because the drag of the strikes were creating on waiting lists and everything was just horrendous. I mean, they settled it at what price? So, I mean, there's a whole different argument about whether or not it was settled in the way that it should have. It's a 2-year deal. I've always said it needs to be a 3-year deal. My guess is I think the junior doctors are going to come back for afters, but we'll see. So, but anyway, it was fixed. So that means we're not really comparing like with like, apples with apples. It's more apples with light bulbs, because the performance went down the pan during the strikes. So it is a good thing. It's also complicated because if you look at waiting lists, 7.5 million people on the waiting list. There's only 6.3 million. There's just people waiting for more than one treatment, and they're called patient pathways, which is what we count when we look at waiting lists. Also, over half of them will be waiting for a diagnostic. Now, the diagnostics, with the acceleration in the diagnostics, really came when the Tories invested in the community hubs, the community diagnostic hubs. That was Steve Barclay, actually, that did that. Right. I mean, they take a long time to set up, but we're reaping the benefits of them now. And of the 60% of people who need some kind of diagnostic, only 20% will need some period of inpatient care. The rest might need nothing or outpatient care. So it's too early to say we've cut the waiting list. The numbers are very fogged.
Well, indeed. I mean, they talk a lot as well about, as you say, those diagnostic centres and people working at weekends, which again is something that you and I have talked about for a long time. You know, there's still an awful lot of hospitals where there's a very, very low number of staff around at the weekends. They haven't changed everything, but if they've changed a bit of it, then good luck to them. But equally, you know, we all know that from the past several weeks we've been hearing that A&Es are still in crisis. People are waiting, you know, tens of hours sometimes to be seen. Sometimes 4 or 5 hours is not exceptional at all. Ambulances are still not unloading patients. People are still in hospitals not being moved out when they could be because they've got nowhere to go. You know, so those big sort of what I would call macro problems are still all there.
Yes, they are. And if you look at the numbers, although the flu numbers are slightly down, the COVID numbers are very sticky still, flatlining, and the Novavirus numbers are 80% worse than they were this time last year. So there's still like a winter crisis. It's not really a winter crisis, it's just
winter, isn't it?
It's just what happens in the winter. You're right, Mike. And so we're still struggling through that. I mean, we actually have had this acceleration in winter illnesses from the autumn, and now we're almost on the doorstep of spring, really, aren't we? So
didn't feel like it this morning.
Right through. The problem is that there's not enough capacity in the NHS. Right. Once you fill the beds up with medical patients who've got these seasonal problems, mainly frail elderly, but you can't get them home safely, then you start overspilling from your medical beds into your surgical beds because you've got nowhere else to put people. When the corridors and the cupboards are full and the wards are full, you've got to use the surgical wards. When you do that, you have to start cancelling waiting list appointments, and that's the trouble that the NHS is facing now. So I think this is a good sign. The trajectory is good, but I think it's too early yet to claim a victory.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, and we have this conversation every year, Roy, and we have had it for several years, is when is somebody in the NHS going to actually make a plan so that this doesn't happen every year, so that we don't have the same winter crisis, that we don't have the same overcrowding? Why don't somebody come up with a better plan, build some more hospitals, do something?
Exactly. The reason is we don't have enough capacity. So the NHS has to plan what they call their surge capacity over the winter months. And I saw the winter plan for this year in June, and it was a perfectly sensible plan. We've now got about 15,000 people, I think, being looked after on virtual wards. That's people not coming in, being looked after at home. So it's doing everything it can with the capacity it's got. But at the end of the day, we do get these seasonal fluctuations, and you see it in other parts of the world as well. Where this year's winter plan, which, as I say, I saw in June, didn't take into account the thought that we're going to have, the Nova virus, the COVID, and the flu and the RSV all at once. I mean, it's very difficult to project that. We projected the flu accurately, but the other, I think it's taken everyone by surprise, to be honest.
Yeah, sure. Good to talk to you, Roy. Thanks very much indeed. Roy Lilley, former NHS Trust Chairman, who agrees with me that these figures that you're going to hear from Wes Streeting throughout the course of the day have been seriously and heavily massaged. As he says, you can smell the massage oil from here as far as that propaganda is concerned. Of course, you won't hear Wes Streeting talking to us about it because Labour don't talk to us. Apparently, I can't remember the last time we had a Labour government minister on here. They must be frightened. I don't know why.